Hi, Chad.
Hello.
It's nice that you made some time for us to talk about a very interesting topic.
Yeah, no. I'm excited to share a bit, and talk. Um, should I start sharing
Yes,
my
please.
experience?
Yes.
So, the short of it basically is, I completed school having no clue what I wanted to do with life. I was very jaded about the whole university system and academics in many ways. I had no intention of doing any sort of tertiary education. To be honest, I thought it was an expensive way to buy a career in many senses. And I feel in many ways it had a lot to do with the way I was introduced and and shown the possibilities. So basically, in short, the way I got introduced to it was things like YouTube, online resources, and actually a career psychologist, which without my dad having those resources, I wouldn't have been here. I ended up having a gap year, decided in that gap year I wanted to study physics, and ended up actually needing to rewrite maths in 2020 to get here. So basically, if I even start back in primary school days, I honestly thought I was quite bad at math. I was quite bad at school. I was average, if not below average. Um, I never did well in any of those kinds of subjects because one, my memory is terrible, and a lot of that in primary school, math is memory based. I couldn't remember my timetables, so I ended up just failing a lot because I just couldn't memorize that 8 times 6 is 48. Um, and it's the same with so many things like those long divisions, story sums, all those, rinse and repeat methods of calculating things without really doing any
I'll
real
tell
math.
I'll tell you an interesting story about memorizing tables later on.
Yeah. So already my story between primary school and high school is completely different itself. So primary school, I was average, if not below average. In fact, in many ways, it was quite confusing. So, as an example, in grade 7, I was almost mocked by a maths teacher because while he was marking my homework, I had given my answer as a decimal fraction over another decimal fraction, and he said, "What on earth do you think you're doing, putting a fraction within a fraction?" Um, Things like that. And yeah, it really did make it difficult. However, when I got into high school, being grade 8, and we started, I suppose, learning real mathematics, not just root methods of actually finding answers, I actually started excelling in ways. I got a few distinctions. I was top of my classes in many ways. Um, and yeah, it was a completely different experience. However, even through high school, though, like the ways we were taught, it was methods of getting marks and methods of getting answers, not methods of trying to understand, not methods of trying to figure out. Not it was all just, you need to get this right, and you need to learn it and get it right, and if you don't, you're going to fail. Um, uh, examples like memorizing proofs. For one that sticks in my head is deriving um, deriving the equation of deriving the formula for a derivative from first principles. It was just given to me on a worksheet as something we had to memorize. Only through YouTube and other resources that I actually learned how to actually prove it and how to derive it, what the H actually means, as to, calculating it as a change in y divided by a change in x, and then you are taking that difference between those x's and y's to an extremely small point, or a limit of 0. It was just something we just had to memorize and write down without understanding, really. And other things, for example, and I mean, I have nothing against most of my teachers, to be honest. I know they had the best of intentions of helping me. Even my school, I loved my school. But just the system in general, it never really showed me the parts of math that are beautiful, the parts of science that are beautiful even. And I was just so scared of failure in many senses. Like, so with, for example, when we were learning the addition rules for vectors, I was mocked in many ways, because when we were taught the parallelogram method for adding two vectors, right, where you have two vectors originating at a point, and then you draw a parallelogram, and where the parallelogram meets, you have a vector. I asked the question, why can I not just, there's a triangle in a sense there, why can't I just draw that other line, because it's the same length? Why do I need it? And I was just mocked and told that it's not how you do it, that's not correct, that's with like no explanation as to what implications it has for the meaning of a vector and how it would affect the whole point of conveying direction as well. So basically, I did, in most senses, average, if not above average in many ways. Thanks to the physics part of physical sciences and not the chemistry part, I ended up with a 71 for physical sciences. That was mostly because I got A's on many physics papers and 50s on many chemistry papers. Maths, I got 63. Most other subjects, I was basically a 50 to 60 student. I almost failed Afrikaans. Then I'd had no clue what I wanted to do with life. I was really lost. I ended up working for my father as a gap year thing, as a driver, where he said, well, you can take a while to figure it out and you can work for me, which I'm thankful for the opportunity. But throughout that year, I was just really frustrated because I was getting no job satisfaction. I had no clue where I wanted to go in life. It was quite depressing. And thankfully, a colleague of my father's recommended that I go to a career psychologist who he had met before. And during that time, it helped me in many ways just understand myself and understand what I actually do enjoy. And also, for the first time in my life, I was actually diagnosed ADD, which that was never picked up in school, probably because I wasn't really a problem child and I was doing okay. So I wasn't a problem in the system's eyes. There was nothing to really look into. And since then, I've been on Concerta, and it's honestly changed my life in many ways. And during that time as well, thanks to Google's algorithms of figuring people out, I was recommended video series on theoretical physics. And during that time, I developed this like almost hole in my life of quantum mechanics, special relativity, general relativity. These are things that it just like, it was like a hole of like, until I understand this, until I can be able to fathom this, calculate it, understand it, I don't know if I would really be able to carry on. So I decided I wanted to study theoretical physics. My maths result, though my physics results actually did exceed the requirements of 50, I had a 63 for math, and you need a 70 for math and a 50 for science to get in at Stellenbosch, and you need 70 for Wits, 70 for UCT. So I decided that I needed to fix that. So I realized I could get provisionally accepted for molecular biology at the university, which I did with the marks I currently had. And I rewrote maths, and I also put on my application that I'm rewriting maths in hopes to get into physics. So during that year, which in many senses aided by my newfound passion for something to do, and also being diagnosed ADD and having the medication, and also being made aware of it, and ways in which I can do better given that knowledge, I ended up actually getting a 91, and I got into theoretical physics. But in the long and short of it is, I feel like the school system, not my school, not my teachers, I just feel like the school system failed me, in that if it weren't by chance interactions through self-study, and my dad having the resources to allow me to see a career psychologist and allow me to actually rewrite maths, because that was no small financial investment either, I would not be here right now, and I'd probably still be a driver for my dad and possibly hating life, really. Yeah, so I just felt like I wanted to share that in a way that we can possibly not accuse anyone or not I just want to improve the system so that people who are possibly in a situation like me without knowing it can really find their passion.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. It's an amazing story, and it's a very important story to share for many reasons. Not just because of the fact that there could be many other students who might have similar experiences as you, but also because there is a lot of truth in that story, in the sense that there is a lot of truth about the deficiencies of the system. And even someone who kind of is happy with the system, who doesn't feel that the system failed them, even for such a person, it would be useful to have knowledge of that truth. So that's amazing. I see we have some others also joining this discussion. If you want to ask any questions to Chad, please feel free to do that. Or if maybe you want to add your own, give your own input, feel free to do that as well. I'm going to do the same thing, but I first want to give the chance to others to do that. What I would say is that I mean, I don't know, maybe this is supposed to be some kind of family secret, but somehow in my family, so my father is a mathematician. He is a professor of mathematics at the University of Cape Town. We moved to South Africa in 2005. Before that, we were in Georgia. So he moved to South Africa, and the family followed, obviously. So one thing that I can say from my own story is that I didn't discover mathematics at school. I discovered mathematics at home. Moreover, I somehow knew from my father that this school is not necessarily the place where you're going to discover the things that have deep meaning for your life. But the school, and I actually tell the same thing to my children as well. For example, a couple of years ago, a year ago actually, a few months ago, in fact, my daughter started to draw in a very impressive way. And it's not something she learned at school. She self-learned it, and I wasn't even aware that she's going through this learning process. I think the school is a good place to get some kind of basic knowledge at the shallow level, which we need because it's good to kind of have an idea of what's going on in the world. But then one might also then question this in the modern system when the information is so much available everywhere, right? But if you want to get some deep encounters, deep intellectual encounters, I think the only way is through your own inquiry. And then you use various things like school or university or the internet as tools, but it's you who is driving the process. And in some sense, I might even say that maybe you're lucky that you had this unpleasant experience from the point of view that you discovered this secret, that it's you who should be seeking the knowledge. Whereas somebody else who feels that they fit in the system, they might never discover this, or maybe they might discover this too late when half of the life has already passed. And so it's an interesting question. Obviously, it also depends on what kind of our personality, right? What we want to do in life, and so on. So all of this is in the context. So I'm a mathematician. I like creative things, and I also like arts and so on. So for me, what I'm saying very much makes sense, but for some other profession, it might not make so much sense. But so what would you advise, Chad, to other learners at school, or maybe even school teachers, in the context of current school system? What can be done? What should be done to perhaps address these issues that you pointed out in your story?
Yeah, it's hard to say because it's a very complex problem. Because the thing is, how can you have a system that is beneficial that both people who aren't mathematicians or want to go into mathematics can still have tools to do basic arithmetic and basic things to function, or the same thing with any other things such as science or history or English. Like it really is a complex issue. However, I would have it would have made my experience probably more insightful if the onus was less about if it was less about achievement and metrics and those sorts of things, and more about an incentive to actually learn and an incentive to understand. So, for example, to give an example, in matric math, when we taught cubic functions, a lot of people struggle with being able to find the coefficients of each term. So a lot of teachers teach this method they call it synthetic division, which is kind of like an amalgamated long division in a way. But it's never, or at least when I was shown it, I wasn't shown like why it works. Like, how does it work? Like, what are we achieving by this other than we have this machine that we spit numbers in and then numbers come out in a sense. So it never really. So for example, in a way, statistics in high school was one of my least favorite sections in math, just because it didn't really, it was like pointless. It just gave numbers that were asked for, and I was shown formulas on how to get those answers. I was extremely surprised for my course, probability theory and statistics was a compulsory module, so I ended up taking it. I probably would have never taken it if it was optional, but that ended up being one of my favorite modules in first semester last year, because the first lecture was I think it was the 3 or the 4 axioms of probability, and building from there. And from that, every single coefficient, every single term, every single constant, it had meaning, and it described something. And it was almost like I'd always been shown these grayscale paintings, and all of a sudden they like just had color and meaning. And it became so the ways in which achievement is what's praised, not learning and not understanding. And also, the system is extremely critical of failure. People now, so I was helping so many people with first year physics, in that most of them knew what to do, but they were so scared of failing because they just couldn't see the results immediately, and they didn't have this recipe of things to do to get an answer out. And it was like better to not attempt than to risk failing. And it really does, I think, make it so feared, resented, not something that becomes an art form, not something that becomes something that has beauty, really.
Yeah, so what I'm getting from what you're saying is basically that it's not the teachers, it's not the learners.
No,
It's the system where
yeah,
competition is number one, where everything is reduces eventually to competition, and which is also not the kind of fun kind of competition, because if you lose the competition, there are bad consequences after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a topic that has come up in various discussions. And believe it or not, there are people who think that competition is a way of ensuring quality. I'm not one of them. I don't think that. I think it's the other way around. I think competition is a way of removing quality. When competition is number one thing to strive for. As a secondary thing, I think it's good, but it shouldn't be the primary thing.
I think
now,
that the metrics we have, they are good. The problem, I personally think that the biggest problem actually is when they're installed. So I think that the competition system we have now is great to measure candidates when they already maybe have had a chance to develop a passion. But
right.
from the grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4 level, it's instilled this necessity of perfection, this necessity that getting something wrong, it's not good. Getting something wrong, it's something to be avoided at all costs. At which, like, by all means, we need metrics to measure people. If we don't have metrics to measure people, we can't just choose and have a system based on you. But I feel like those metrics, they are instilled before a seed of passion and understanding has even had a chance to grow out of the subject or subjects, out of everything, math, language, music even.
There is another side to it. I don't subscribe to that other side, but let me still acknowledge that there is another side. So if we are going to use metrics eventually at some point to classify, right, then for many people, it would have been advantageous if they had experience in taking part in such competitions and classifications, but at least psychologically they're better prepared for it. I think that's exactly what the system tries to achieve. They try to train learners in performing, so that when the big day comes, maybe when they're going to get there, they will be trained for that. But then that training, as you said, takes away the space to improve, the space to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes without being penalized necessarily for them. Yeah. I see that there is a message on the chat. If you would like to read that out, the author of the message, please do so. The chat is, I'm not sure the chat is visible on the recording, and I don't want to read it without knowing that the author of the chat is happy for me to read it, since we're making the recording. I don't want even to say the name of the person, maybe they don't want to. Okay. Oh, okay, so he gives permission to read. I used to do maths Olympiads in high school, and looking back, I just remember all the pressure I was under to perform and to put in enough hours. I want to be good at maths, but that takes a long time. I recall hating everything about myself back then and being unable to relate to anyone. I think I've fixed some of these issues since, but I still need much more work. I think you should enjoy your teenage years and find some healthy balance in terms of workload to prepare for future studies, but also enjoy what you're doing. I think that really being good at maths is something for old people. Well, that's so well said. That's very, very well said. Yeah, that's amazing. In fact, that reminds me what my father often says. There is this famous Fields Medal, for mathematics. It is awarded to mathematicians who are younger than 40 years. And I've heard sometimes my father say about that when you're less than 40 years old, you're a child. You can't really be a proper mathematician. So the whole idea of Fields Medal is not quite what people perceive it to be. But yes, I completely agree with this sentiment. Can I also say the name, your name, who wrote this? Is it okay for me to say your name? So okay, but then the question is, what do we do about this? Because the world goes on, and this system, which has some defects. Okay, I got the permission now. It was from Mr. Dixon, who wrote that very illuminating message. Thank you, Mr. Dixon, for that. Is there anything we can do about this, Chad?
I believe in all things that there is always something you can do. Like as also with many things, I don't believe there's a way to fully solve it. As many issues, unfortunately, probability of things is they will always not work at some point, or in some way. But I don't have the answers. I don't have the answers, but I feel like if we don't share our thoughts and feelings, and we aren't willing to put them aside in a way that we can, that our feelings about issues in a way that we can make it better, not perfect, better. Yeah. So I'm very young. I've never experienced what it's like to be a teacher. I've never experienced what it is like to run a school or to design a schooling system. I'm very ignorant in that sense. So I understand that it can't be easy. And I have a lot of respect for the people in those positions. It's just if they don't figure out where the system can help others, then we can't make it better. So to put in one way, while I was failing at memorizing times tables, I was able to, at 11 years old, learn how to solve a Rubik's Cube. Math isn't supposed to incentivize me differently than a Rubik's Cube. They should incite me the same way. I was never, if you get what I'm saying, it was extremely conflicting. I was told I'm clever in so many ways, but I was also told I'm stupid in so many ways. Because like I could do things like this, but I could never memorize timetables or just do long division.
I should still tell this story about times table, but before that, I think we have someone else who wants to say a few words.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, I never struggled with math at university. Not at university days. I mean, at school, well, it was actually very easy for me, and because of that, I think a lot of people took it easy for me. Took it easy on me, and I think that sort of messed with me. And I believe that schools look at someone, if they're doing something, if they're not good at something, then they stop paying attention to them. But then the people that are good at, that are very good at it, they feel like they can do everything, and so they also don't pay attention to them. It's mostly the people that are like average and like that they'll pay the most attention to. And I've seen it a lot because when I went to high school, I actually had to teach a few students that were struggling with maths, and these were now the people that were seen as the ones that couldn't do it. And what I've seen is that it's just a lack of understanding. And what I was taught from one of my teachers that I really love is that math is a subject of understanding. It's not learning and memorizing, and just, yeah, there is some aspects of that, but it's mainly understanding. If you can't understand it, you won't be able to do it at a higher level. And so ever since lower school, ever since a teacher talked to me, I always went ahead and studied why are these equations like this? What is making this to be like this? And that was one of my joys. I would spend hours trying to figure these things out because I was never taught them, but I did it on my own. And I believe that many students, if they just were taught things that I had to teach myself, they would have loved math, and they would have been able to do a lot better than they did at school. And from sort of tutoring I did, the first thing I was trying to do was teach the basics. Where does this come from? Why is this equation like this? How do you derive it? What is the meanings of this? I think Mr. Davies actually said something about that.
Yeah, sorry, you sorry.
You can go.
No, like a silly example is like when we did pre-algebra in grade 7, we were never really explained what a variable was. We were basically just told, whatever you see around that letter, just do the opposite and then write down the answer in a way. Whereas and people they still, I believe, even in high school levels, they still just don't understand what a variable was. But if it was just explained as in a way like, so we know that we need a value for this. We don't know what that is yet, so we'll just name it something. We could name it something like John or Jeff or Alex, but that wouldn't really be helpful because it just doesn't make sense to write out Alex when you're trying to solve something. So we just give it an arbitrary name like X or Y or A or theta or beta, or so we just naming it because we don't know what it is yet. Like if it was like that, then the need to undo everything done to it makes more sense.
So yes, like what you just said, it's an interesting way. So from a personal standpoint, I know my mom is teaching dyslexia. And the thing with people with dyslexia is they associate everything with everything. Because I know at school they used to teach them, let me just take it from a different standpoint quickly. At school they tell you A is for apple. Now someone with dyslexia will now think if he sees A, if he thinks A, he thinks an apple. But you're not supposed to do that. So then you struggle to read it because every time you see A, you think apple. So that's what I found with math is that like what you just said with the whole variables. Now the person's going to go through the equation and now he's going to be stuck in his head the whole time. What is this variable? What is the meaning of this variable? And then he's not going to be able to solve the equation because now he doesn't understand it. And especially with a subject like math, just memorizing the equation is not going to get you anywhere because equations change. It always looks different.
Memorizing proofs, just straight up needing to memorize them. So like obviously you do want to memorize in ways what like the things you are targeting. So for example, you will want to memorize, so like if you wanting to prove like can't think of anything now, but like if you're wanting to prove something, you'll obviously need to remember, okay, I need to have these 3 steps. My goal is to show these 3 things, and by showing those 3 things, then I can. But the part of then memorizing variable by variable, letter by letter, every single portion of the proof without knowing at all what it means and still getting full marks for it. Not that I'm against them getting marks for it, but that's not how or why we should be getting marks for it. The idea behind a proof is that you know why this thing is true. So I feel like we don't really accomplish much when we're just taught to memorize every single variable in every single line to show a proof. Things like that.
Yes, exactly. You can go, sir.
You know what's interesting? I've had these kinds of discussions with my colleagues, other academics who teach at university in various forums, and I've also had these discussions with school teachers and also with students. And what is absolutely remarkable is that the main theme of these discussions is always the same. So if you talk to school teachers, not maybe inside the classroom, but in forums like this, where teachers are interested to explore metaphysics of teaching, the first thing they say is that how do we make sure that students understand, that the pupils understand? Because there is a strong instinct to just memorize things, and how do we get them to understand things? When I talk to my colleagues, other lecturers, they say exactly the same thing. And then when I talk to students, they say, why doesn't the teacher or the lecturer explain things instead of just wanting me to memorize things? So there is this cycle. And I'm wondering whether maybe, I've been myself I've been opposed to memorization for all of my life, and I myself wasn't a good person in terms of memorizing things. But I'm wondering if maybe memorization is not like the lowest layer of learning, and then other layers build up, but even if maybe somebody tries to teach you how not to memorize and how to understand, if in your development you are in that layer, you will still stay there until you yourself move from that layer, transition from that layer to another layer. And sometimes the transition can be quick, and it can come at a much early age. So, for example, you not being comfortable with what was happening at school could be an indication that maybe you've transitioned to the next higher form of learning before everybody else has. Because, I mean, why don't other school children protest, right?
I mean, one example opposite of mine is, I'm sure we all know those people who in primary school were getting 80s, 90s, perfect results on all their math tests, and then they get to high school and they've ended up actually just passing Mathelet. Nothing against Mathelet, it has a place, but you know what I'm saying? People that were almost like thought by teachers as this is like a maths prodigy. They were just really, really good at memorizing how to get the right answer.
And we have the same phenomenon with every next stage. So there are a lot of times there are students who come to university with very good marks, and then they struggle at the university. But then, I mean, I interact a lot with such students, and very often they say that the way school taught them things is different. I mean, I also don't want to blame the students. In fact, I don't want us to blame anyone, right? We're trying to understand we are all part of the system.
We're all trying to understand each other.
Yeah. And then there is this next level where a student transitions from undergraduate level to postgraduate level. And then there is this next level when you go from master's to PhD. So and then the next one when you graduate from PhD. So a PhD graduate, someone who has a PhD in mathematics, you expect this person to be able to come up with their own direction for research. But very often you get PhD graduates who can't do that. They were very good PhD students. They did what the supervisor told them very well, and the supervisor was hoping that they would become creators of mathematics, but they're still behind on that. And I think that it really is something that should come naturally to a human being. I mean, going to the next stage, and one cannot force it. And so the school and the university and all these systems probably are kind of just because of statistics, right? They are at a certain average level, where an average person the level of awakening, if you like, of an average person corresponds to the level of expectation and requirements. But then there are some who are behind this level, some who are ahead of this level, and of course those who are either behind or ahead will suffer. Do you think it's possible that actually everything is fine in our system? It's just that maybe we need more awareness that our system caters for certain people, and we're not all the same at each stage in our lives, and we're different, and so the system should maybe cater more for this diversity, and currently doesn't.
I think again, like I don't believe we can ever reach a perfect system, because we cannot fully cater to every single person's needs in every single way. That's just an unfortunate thing of nature. However, I think a big problem is that there's not enough communication at each of the levels. So, for example, you as a university professor probably don't have the best of ideas as to what it's like for a grade 1 teacher in their job, and they don't understand what it's like in yours. And in many senses, it's like professors are like, why can they not just do this? Do they not see what's happening here? And then grade 1 teachers are like, you're saying this, but you have no idea how difficult it is to try and get these basic concepts across. But in the process of us being so defensive of our systems, we don't communicates enough. And like, I think it's both ways. So for example, I watched a YouTube video where there were a few theoretical physicists who were suggesting that high schools introduce basic quantum mechanics principles so students are exposed to it. And I'm like, that's not fathomable. You can't. It's that like, one, there's almost no way that a student can reach a mathematical ability that they can understand what that means in any significant way, because yes, there are nice stories about how quantum mechanics works, but none of them really actually have any relevance until you have the mathematics, which I still don't understand, and I know I don't understand, which is why I've almost stopped trying to until I get it in lectures and things. But so it's like, on the one hand, it's like, at the highest levels, people can't understand the base level, and then at the base level they can't understand the highest level, so we don't converse with each other because of our arrogance and our pride. And part of that is because people care about their jobs, you know. And I can honestly say almost every single one of my teachers cared about me very much and wanted me to succeed. My school wanted me to succeed, wanted me to get a job, wanted me to be able to do well. But it's just, I don't know if we have enough conversation.
You know, there are quite a lot of conversations. Like, for example, the conference where I'm presenting tomorrow, it's an example of a conversation. And there are more conversations than either a teacher or professor have time for. That's happening across the country, not just in South Africa, in the world. So definitely there are conversations. And yet there seems to be this feeling that there is some problem that could have been solved easily and is not being solved.
What I can also say is the seminar tomorrow is with the IEB and hosted by the IEB. I'm fortunate enough that I've experienced both systems. I was in a DBE high school, but my rewrite program I had to do through the IEB, because only the IEB provide private institutions with the resources to allow people to go back and write single subjects. So if it weren't for the IEB, I would never have been able to have this opportunity, to be honest, to rewrite maths and redo it completely. There was just no way to redo my SBA through a DBE. So to try and get from a 63 to a 70 in rewriting only my final paper, it would have been almost impossible, really. Having written both, I can with confidence say the IB program definitely is more inducive to understanding and more inducive to thought than the DBE program. Though there were less proofs and memorization things, like, for example, I don't think we had to prove derivatives with first principles in IB, which, though people could say, well, you should know, but the difference is people in DBE don't know that anyway because they just memorized it. There were less proofs, I think, because they know there's just no point in asking them. People are going to memorize them thing by thing. So they will rather ask another question that forces understanding and thought, not to try and go against people who battle with it, but so that people who take mathematics are actually learning mathematics. So again, even the IB, it won't be perfect, but it was definitely a better experience for me, having done my rewrite through them.
Well, in trying to find a flaw that we can fix, what about the following? Fragmentation of knowledge. So when you get tested for every weeks or months, even work and so on, you kind of prepare for that assessment and then you forget about it. You prepare basically by memorization. Wouldn't it have been better, for instance, if, for example, that it's like, for instance, 2 years where students study mathematics, and then at the end of the 2-year period, maybe there is like 3 months when they can start preparing for a certain assessment. And of course, in this process of preparing for an assessment, they have chance for consultations with professors and teachers if it's at school and so on. And then this assessment is more holistic, that assesses the understanding of the work, of the entire They understand the entire picture rather than fragmented knowledge of pieces. But then, I mean, if there was such a system, first of all, I would like to know what you think about this. But then the second question is there a danger possibly that some people would simply not do anything in these 2 years, and then there will be big failure when the assessment needs to approach?
It's hard to say really. Testing procedure again is I don't know if testing procedure is something we can ever get perfect. I think that what would be greater is if there was more room, not to fail entirely, but to fail on a small scale. So for example, in most of our university modules, there's a weekly quiz, there's a weekly TUT, which does contribute to your class mark. However, it's a small significant one that, like I have, and I'm sure almost everyone has, you can get 0 for a TUT on a almost frequent basis and still perform and get a distinction, because it allows you to learn slowly and allows you to get things wrong slowly, and in a sense. And that also means that you get this fragmentation, because if you're being tested on it more often, you're practicing it more frequently, and it allows you to refresh those sectors of learning.
So school doesn't do that, right? At school, you don't have that opportunity to fail small things.
I mean, there are projects and assignments, but like, I mean, for example, physics, I think, or physical science, I think like every term or maybe every second term, there'd be like one chemistry practical, one physics practical. There was like one really big test, a small class test, and then there were exams, really. Like, for example, I personally feel like the exams in matric, the exams in June, July are way too close to trials, considering trials are term 2 is supposed to prepare you for trials, and trials are supposed to prepare you for your final papers, but they are like a month and a half, 2 months apart, and a lot of those 1-2 months is a lot of those like 2-3 month periods is actually supposed to be your holiday, in a sense. And on top of that, you've got like, depending on how many you take, 7-8 subjects. It really is difficult to actually learn from those mistakes you may have made.
So you're saying that one could do some minor adjustments, not a major systemic adjustment, but just minor adjustments in terms of thinking carefully about the time frames between assessments and these kinds of things. But I think if we go back to what you were saying in the beginning, I think in this discussion we lost the main thing that you were saying, and I think that was that the spirit of discovering knowledge was somehow something that was hidden away until you yourself came across it. And maybe we shouldn't worry too much about the assessment and the school and the university structure, but maybe we should find other means of making that spirit accessible to learners and university students. But if so, then what would these other means be? I mean, should we encourage learners to watch YouTube like you did?
I think it's hard to encourage, because as I've said, I'm in a privileged position in that I had a mobile phone, I had Wi-Fi. My father had the resources to allow me to see a psychologist, and he had the resources to allow me to rewrite math. I had the resources to go to the high school I did, and I mean, even though I talk about how, in a sense, high school did not succeed in allowing me to figure out what I wanted to do, the amounts of education and knowledge I did get is something that the vast majority, especially in this country, don't even get afforded that. So it really is hard to say that, like, that should be when that is a very privileged thing in a sense as well. Yeah.
My opinion on the whole thing is, so my school used to do this thing we did it for a month as a testing phase. So every week it's like a tutorial almost for math. So they gave us like a research sort of thing. So we did Pascal's triangle and all those other things. And now we had to go, and so we first had like a whole seminar thing, like a lecture thing. They taught us what it is, what this is. And then they gave us a bunch of questions which we had to go do research on, discover for ourselves, to make it fun for us and to learn more about mathematics by exploring and researching our own stuff. And what I believe is, if something like that is implemented earlier, like in lower school, so that people can start cultivating this love for mathematics and wanting to find out more, to have that curiosity of, you know what, math is more than just adding numbers. Let me go research. Let me go find out more stuff about this. I also believe that, okay, answer on that first, I think.
No, please go ahead. Go on.
So I wanted to say, so in lower school, I believe that there should be more room for creativity. I know that in primary school now.
Sorry, I quickly want to close my door. Yeah.
In primary school now, they sort of teach you a method, and now you have to stick to that method. You can't go away from the method, because then you'll lose marks, especially with things like addition and subtraction, multiplication. So they have this one method, you have to follow this method. If you don't follow the method, you will lose marks. And I think that is something that should not be there. Kids should be allowed to be creative, find their own method, just explore if that method works for them, and then the teachers should encourage it and check. Is this method viable, or is it actually going to be more destructive to the student than it will be helpful? So it's more of the teacher's there to guide you, not to tell you what to do.
But when you have a big class and you're one teacher versus a large number of pupils or students, that becomes more a challenge to be so personalized, right?
Yes, exactly. And I've noticed that is a big problem in the governmental schools, especially. It's one teacher to many students, and it's hard for them to get to every student, especially at a younger age where kids are. It's harder for them to learn, and it's harder for them to understand the stuff. And if there's many of them to one teacher, the teacher can't go to everyone and help them to understand. And then, because at the lower ages when you're supposed to learn these things, and if you can't get the understanding in primary school, you're going to struggle at high school. And
I think also a big factor in the system. I mean, I can't really call it a problem because it's because people care. But a factor in the system is people are teachers for many different reasons, right? So you do get math teachers who are there because of their passion of mathematics. You also get math teachers who are there because they struggled a lot with the subject themselves, and they learned techniques that were maybe not mathematics based and more just allows you to be able to pass and allows you to be able to succeed. And their passion is being able to allow you to succeed. So they show you how they taught. But often what ends up happening is when somebody who isn't that way gets a teacher that is that way, then they get taught the method that is less conducive to their learning because the teacher assumes that they're going to battle with this. Let me show them the shortcut. And again, it's out of the goodness of their own heart, and it's out of what they want. They want the best for students.
Yeah, I think what you said now is a very important point, because no matter what system you have, there's always going to be a mismatch of personalities between the teacher and the student. And you can't really solve this problem, especially when the teacher is not able to interact one-on-one with everyone.
Schools can't hire 100 different math teachers for whatever personality child might come along. Yeah.
But what about? An idea came to my mind in this discussion. What about having one of the subjects that you study, both at school and university, being a subject for developing your passion? There is no teacher there. You basically sit in class and you do whatever you like to do. and you build on that. And every now and then you have consultations, and maybe even psychologists and other teachers give talks and try to inspire and so on. But there is no performance there. You only showcase. So if you learn something, you can showcase this to others, but you don't get judged on that, and you basically have this freedom to explore your interests. And for one person, this could be looking into background of mathematics. For another person, this could be developing their art skills.
So in a way, you're suggesting a very, very early level what abstract math 214 is supposed to achieve, in a sense.
I like
278, yes. Yes, but no, in 278 we still have a bit of restriction, and to be honest, this restriction is because of the pressure from my colleagues even, and also the university. If I had complete freedom to do whatever I want to do in the module, I would have told students, you do whatever you like, and then at the end of the year, or maybe in between, if you prefer, I'm happy to talk to you whatever you did, and I'm happy to guide you and so on, but it's your call, you do whatever you like. So what if we have something like that starting from kindergarten?
Like, yeah, it would be really difficult, and it requires resources that unfortunately
what resources would we need? We don't need any resources.
Well, as an example, you'd need teachers that are trained to be able to that are trained to understand children in ways that they aren't at the moment. Yes, they do, but what you're suggesting would require a much deeper level of that. And also, it would be really difficult to do that when most schools out there have 50, 60 children in a single class for a single teacher. So that would be pretty difficult.
No, but I'm actually saying for it to be kind of free session where the teacher doesn't really do anything in that session. The teacher just lets maybe the only thing the teacher does is to keep some sort of discipline so that the whole class is not just a mess.
That's a good. I love that idea. It's very nice, but like Davies said, it's the resources thing. So say someone has this passion for cooking or baking or knitting, all that stuff. Most schools can't provide those type of things. I think like a good example is like how
we
the
have
States.
Internet nowadays, right?
That's also true, but not everyone has access to these things. But I think like the States, you know how states have these clubs. There's a baking club, there's a knitting club, there's a whatever club. Those things are really cool, and it helps people find their passion. I know my school tried to do these electives, so they'd have a knitting elective. So its teachers came and they said, cool, I can teach baking, I can teach knitting, I can teach crocheting or whatever the stuff are. And then kids can go, okay, cool, I want to try this, I want to try this, I want to try this. And they can go, it's a whole, like a explore.
Well, talking about clubs, I mean, this is exactly the topic that Mr. Dixon touched on. So he said he used to do maths Olympiads in school. And this, instead of these Olympiads being a tool for developing your passion, it became a tool for getting pressure.
This is another thing. There are a lot of resources that are supposed to create passion among people, but companies, universities, you name it, whatever private entity have started using those things that were supposed to incite passion in people as performance metrics. So now being a maths Olympiad becomes something that people want on a resume or CV, whether or not they actually enjoyed it at all. Things like local youth councils, things like student government, things like being prefects, those things that are supposed to come out of passion have now become performance metrics.
And even even my suggestion would easily turn into a performance metric, because then you could see who achieved a certain amount of passion, right? And then you turn it into another competition. So
I mean, it's difficult. I think it's difficult for people to not make a competition out of something.
Yeah.
I mean, from a young age, say you had a sibling, okay, cool, I can run faster than you. Oh, my mom likes me more than you, or whatever. It's just something that's human nature, I think. It's always, you always want to compete. And I think it's a problem people face is that, and it's a difficult thing to get rid of. But I believe that, okay, well, like you said, it's unhealthy competition. You have healthy competition, you have unhealthy competition. And I believe that the most healthy competition is to compete against yourself. And I think that's something schools struggle to implement.
Do you maybe think that the topic we are trying to discuss now is actually a topic that can be, for example, compared to, let's say, duels? Do you know in Europe they had this system of duels where it was allowed to invite someone to and kill them eventually?
Yes, okay.
Something that we don't do anymore, at least not in civilized, quotation mark, civilized part of the world. So do you think that it is simply something we have to outgrow, this competitive mindset towards learning? I mean, as human civilization.
Yes, I believe so. It is something we need to outgrow, but also you shouldn't lose it completely, because it's that competitiveness that drives some people to achieve more stuff. Like if Samsung didn't have Apple to compete against, they wouldn't have reason to innovate their phone to make more money.
Well, maybe this is the story that we tell ourselves to justify that we have this competitive attitude.
That could also be true.
I think that we're in many ways we're actually going the opposite way of trying to outgrow the problem. So I personally think that in an age where information is so readily available and more readily available than ever, because as we've progressed and evolved as a civilization, education has become more than wanting to learn. It's become a necessity for survival, and that's only becoming worse because the fourth industrial revolution, with that coming, with AI rapidly taking over jobs that don't require education, such that unless you can do something a computer can't, or a robot can't, or a lever can't, or a machine can't, unless you know something, you won't be able to put food on the table. So I think if we could outgrow it, we're going in a wrong direction, but unfortunately that's the nature of change. So instead of trying to stop that, we need to somehow try and incentivize people to get back to a passion for learning, and then using that learning to contribute to society, rather than, if you want to contribute to society, listen, you need an education, and that education is expensive, it's difficult, and if you don't get it, you are not going to succeed. So in a place where you can learn almost anything you want to, people almost don't want to.
But don't you remember yourself I mean, I think we all went through this age when we were in a state where we had a passion to play, and when we were told that instead it's better maybe by our parents to learn something instead of playing, we would feel that we are being confined in this box that we don't want to be in. Now, imagine our parents didn't tell us to learn, and they let us play all the time. Do you think that maybe we would have, I mean, not having any pressure at all, maybe we would have chosen we would have never even discovered the passion for learning. So what I'm trying to say is that I think the passion for learning might be a consequence of realization that learning is the only way to exist in this universe.
I mean, it's a good point. So,
I mean, if you knew that, imagine you had infinite amount of wealth, okay, and you really didn't have to do anything. Would you still be keen to learn?
I think okay, well, maybe if I'd grown up in different circumstances. I mean, I did grow up in privileged circumstances, in that I've always had a roof over my head, always had food on the table, always had running water, electricity. So maybe maybe I would be in a different place. But for one, I genuinely am studying what I am for, not for any career incentive money wise. I got no clue how my future is going to look that way. I know I'll just do my best to figure out. But like, I've never been in a place where I've had to actually struggle financially and see what it's like and have a real dying need to just get out of poverty or that sort of situation. So it could be just because I'm from a privileged point of view.
Well, I was trying to say the opposite, that knowing that when you grow up at some point you'll have to take over and you'll have to have a job and so on. Did that not play a role for your development of passion for learning? Because I mean, it was like you eventually you have to do something, make yourself financially independent and so on, and learning seems to be the best way to achieve that.
If I'm honest, not at all. Yeah, no, I had very little academic pressure from my parents at all. So basically, my father was not academic at all. He was dyslexic. He barely passed matric. He ended up being in the permanent force for army for a decent period of time, not knowing what he wanted to do with life. And he got a job as a tire salesman and ended up working his way into a director position at a large tire company. So where he was, education wasn't the only way to success. So he was very open. In fact, he at many points when I was wanting to study for a paper on Saturday, he was trying to get me to come diving with him. He was trying to get me to go surfing with him. If anything, it was not that. So my dad did say school is very important, and I do need it, and I do need to learn. But for him, learning at school level was not the only way, and kids must be kids and have fun. That was his outlook on life and his. So no, not really. Yeah.
Okay.
He was always just, from his point of view, I was doing way better than passing, and it was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree. Like, yeah, make a really good point. And I mean, that's how it should be. You shouldn't just be focused mainly on education. You should still live your life. You should still be a kid, and because you'll find different ways. Like, if you want to be a soccer player, you're not going to focus just on education. You're going to focus on building that talent you have for soccer, and then you'll become a soccer player. That doesn't require the level of education now to become a lecturer. And from what I experienced is, okay, I don't have those talents to do soccer and all that stuff, but I still played it. I still experienced those experiences because it was something that would enlighten me. It will help me grow not as a person, because it will give you those connections. And I realized that, cool, I need my education, because if I don't get my education in the future, I'm not going to be able to get a job, and I won't be able to make my money to be able to live and then go on to help my children to have experienced their own type of stuff. And I mean, make that realization. I don't know if you make that realization in lower school, but I had my realization only towards the end of high school. And it's sort of weird, is that as soon as you only realize it, then you finally want to actually put an effort. But then depending on when you realize it, might be too difficult or something like that.
In many senses, we as children were forced to make quite important decisions that impacted a lot of our future. Like in many senses, when you're in grade 10 and when you've just finished grade 9 and you are I think when you finish grade 9 you're 15, going 16 that year. At 15 years old, you're making a decision on your subjects, especially with Mathelet, physics, not physics, CAT, RT, biology, and many of those don't affect things. Like, I never took biology, and I could still get into a biology course at the university. I was provisionally accepted for that, but that's provided I had maths and science. I made that decision when I was like 15 years old, and if you choose to make a decision that you end up being in a place where now you go to a career where you needed the other thing, it's almost like you're punished a pretty high price for a decision when you made when you were 15.
It's a very interesting thing, because I actually had the exact experience that you just said. So I took accounting when that was one of the subjects I chose to do. But now I struggled so much at it, and I was such a horrible experience from grade 9 up to grade 12 that I just gave up on accounting at the end of it. And I wanted to, before grade 9, I actually wanted to go accounting to be one of the careers I go into. And just I lost my passion for it because of from grade 9 to 12. And I believe the reason for that is I didn't actually know what it was. I wasn't taught what exactly is accounting. We just did very easy stuff, and we got very easy marks because it was easy stuff to memorize. And a lot of people actually had the exact same experience as me, especially in my school now. I know many other schools didn't have that experience, but for me, that was what it was.
With that in mind, I think that the A-level system that the United Kingdom has, whereby afterwards when you do your A-levels, you choose which A-levels you want to do, and while you're doing them, you can decide if you want to continue with that A-level, or you can decide to go to a different one. Or after you've done an A-level, maybe you can go working for a while and then realize, oh wait, and then it's like you're not restarting a process, you're just continuing a process. You are it's almost like we're picking our branches to go down now, and it's like the way to erase, like, I mean, even like I said, there was no way through the Department of Education, meaning the DBE papers, there wasn't a way for me to start my SBA from scratch with math. My only options were to rewrite the major papers and to try and make up something like 10-15% using one or two papers. It's extremely difficult, and that's every single time you try, that's an entire year that you have to wait. So the system also doesn't really help much in being able to change your mind.
But doesn't that still go back to this problem that if everybody was experimenting with that, there would be just too much of work to do, and the people who are able to test, check these examinations and so on, again, the same problem of one teacher against a large class. So there's only so much that the teacher can fit in terms of time, right? We are restricted in time, and this restriction in time forces certain restrictions, which in lots of times causes some situations where which is not fair to people. But I think that is exactly why there should also be so the rules that the country or the university or the school has, the rules ensure that the system is sustainable, right? But people who execute those rules, they should also have some common sense. For instance, if someone like you comes to university and explains, I mean, let's imagine that IB thing wasn't an opportunity, right? Let's say it doesn't exist in South Africa. So you come to university and say, look, this is my story. Now I really would like to go to university. And instead of telling you, no, according to the rules, you can't, then they tell you, okay, if you're so passionate about this, why don't you talk to us and tell us what you know?
I mean, it's one thing that actually did happen is even after my rewrites, I almost got declined acceptance. In fact, I actually was, because rewrite students are not made aware. So when you're in matric, you're informed that you don't need to manually submit your matric results. The university gets them automatically. You don't need to worry about sending in statements of results or whatever. Rewrite students aren't informed that their results aren't manually updated. So even though I had completed my rewrite, I was under the impression that my rewrite results would be submitted with my application. I actually was last year. It was the day before or I think it was 4 days before orientation. I was in Stellenbosch. I was here already, and I got declined. I got refused admission because of my marks, and I emailed whoever I could, and I managed to get on the phone with the helpline, and they said, no, if you are a rewrite student, you have to do that yourself. So I did manage to I did manage to email the right people at the right time, speak to the right people, that they managed to see my updated results and allow me to reapply for admission. But like, it is really okay, I'm not gonna like say it was like a gauntlet or whatever, but it is very difficult to know what your options are if you want to go back to do something, in a sense. Your options aren't that well known, and even when they aren't well explained. It is very stressful the entire time as to whether this is going to work.
Yeah, so, well, surely there could be many different ways one can improve the system, but also more globally, as you said right from the beginning, I don't think it's possible to have a perfect system. There will always be some flaws, right?
Yeah.
And so what is important there is for the one who is looking for the opportunity to look hard and not to give up. And for the one who is in the position of giving the opportunity, not to decline the opportunity just because of some very cold-minded justification of rules. That you take each particular scenario into account and see whether the rules really apply. I mean, some kind of moral principles that of treating each other in a good way, right? So it's all very complex. Do you think we are we reaching any conclusion? Probably not, right?
Yeah, I don't think we ever can. Put it this way, I feel like if we ever felt like we did reach a conclusion, there's a big problem there. And that means we've decided we can't make it better. I think that if you've decided it can't be better, then you have failed. Again, I'd like to reiterate, the people in power, I respect their position. I'd like to say I understand their position, but I don't. I'm very ignorant as to the stresses, the positions, the decisions, etc. that they have to make. And I would say that they've done a really good job in almost every facet. It's just that if we don't hear how it could be better, it never can be better. So I have faith in the people in power, but if the people in power don't hear how the system can be improved, not that the system is bad, but if you get what I'm saying, I have a lot of respect for the people that do make the powerful decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, the way system works is that when someone identifies something that could be improved, it really takes an effort from this person to communicate this to whoever is in power. Because when you're in power, you have still limited time. You don't have more time than other human beings, and you cannot listen to everyone. The higher up you are, the more people would want to talk to you, and you physically cannot fit to talk to everyone. And so it takes a lot of effort for the person who wants their voice to be heard, for the voice to be heard. But I don't think we have that issue necessarily. I think, I mean, imagine you could design your own system. Do you know clearly right now exactly how you would change the system?
Yeah, no,
That's what I mean by reaching a conclusion.
I don't envy their position at all. I know I don't have the qualifications, the information, the experience necessary to make any sort of a decision nearly the level as the. So I'm not in any way implying that that I feel like I know the answers. I don't. I really don't, and I'm not going to try and say that I do.
So I don't know if this is on the topic we're speaking about now, but from the whole, I think the education system as a primary high school, like from what I've experienced in my first year now in university, is the lecturer is just there to explain the topic. They aren't there to teach you every single thing about it. They want you to take the initiative, go back and self-study. and learn it for yourself and find understanding in it by yourself. And then you can go back to them, email them, talk to them about, cool, I don't understand this part. Can you explain this part to me? Instead of him explaining the whole section to you, I think what should be implemented in, because I like that system. So what I think should be implemented in primary and high school is students need to be taught how to study, how to go on their own and learn about it. I think because I believe that's the biggest problem people struggle with going into university from high school is they don't know how to properly study the stuff on their own, because on high school you're taught everything. And then you just revise what you've been taught. When university is, you aren't taught everything. You have to actually go and find out on your own and learn by your own. And I believe that is the biggest thing that should change in high school, lower school.
Yes, and in fact, what you said is pretty much the zenith of any form of education. The best thing you can teach a person is to give the person opportunity to learn by themselves, and to lead, to try your best to lead this person to arriving to that skill.
I have one question. Do any of you know when lower schools and high schools have had the same teaching system for a long time now? When was this implemented first? Exactly. The type of education. Because if I'm not wrong, it hasn't changed for a while.
Yeah, I think we have universally in the worldwide quite uniform education from the point of view of the aspects that we're discussing, right? It's been there for centuries, I guess.
So from what I understood from what my parents had experiences, low school and high school teaches you to, as soon as you get out of grade 12, you go work. You have the abilities to just go work, not to go further as in style university works. And I believe in the modern society of now, like you said, the fourth industrial revolution is approaching. Lower school and high school is not built for that. It's still built for the previous system. It's still built for the third industrial revolution, which is past now. And that way of teaching isn't made for what we need at the moment, or what we want to have.
Well, before the school systems were introduced, let's say if we go back to Europe in somewhere like 13th or 14th century or something like that, I think the emphasis was that everybody would have some work to do, right? They would have some profession. This idea of putting together all the people as a compulsory system where you bring everybody together and you try to teach them something, this is relatively recent if we count centuries. And one can, I guess, say that it has taken away the opportunity from young people to develop profession early on. But now you're saying something opposite, that we should do even more of that. Is that what you're saying?
I believe, yeah, I think, yeah. So I believe now the school system all focuses on certain stuff more than other stuff, I believe.
Yeah,
and also is we are advancing faster than we used to. And the system is not keeping up with that progression. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I believe.
Yeah, we have a bit of a contradiction in incentives in a way, in that coming very soon, it's going to be even more of a requirement that people learn to survive, but we're trying to get people to care less about learning to survive and more just because it's what they want to do. But it's going the opposite direction, really.
I think in at every age there is always this feeling that we are not doing something right, and I think this is, if you look at history, people always talk about that in their own age, that something is not right, something should, and sometimes maybe the stories also repeat. I would actually like to recommend you to watch interview with Bertrand Russell. He was a mathematician, philosopher, who has very interesting. These are old films, of course, because he lived in the first half of 20th century. But there are very interesting interviews on YouTube where he talks about his age and what things have changed from his when he was young and when he's older. He also talks about the education system, how the education system has changed, how before everything was more about the rules, and then things became more liberal, and how this liberalism allowed more mathematics, for example, to be part of the education. But then he concludes that he thinks that mathematics perhaps maybe not as important as, for instance, and mathematics and philosophy maybe is not as important as some other subjects. And the subjects he mentions, I don't think they would be very useful in modern day. So he tried to make some predictions what is useful, and he basically fails in some sense. We don't really know what future brings, right? There is a lot of us, and we try to advance forward, but we don't know exactly which direction we're going, and the direction we're going very much relates to how we should go in that direction, right? And the technological advances we had very recently, it is already impacting education system. I mean, we are talking over over computer right now, yes. So in acknowledging that it's difficult to settle these big questions which people have been trying to talk about for centuries, is there some specific things in our modern life where we know that, okay, in this specific thing, we could do this a little better, and little better means specifically this way. And I think that when we pose this, as soon as we pose this question, immediately two thoughts come to mind. One is that I know how to do things better for myself. I know what to do tomorrow that will make my life better than I have life today. But if I have to make a decision about a group of people, then I immediately say, okay, no, I don't know. Do you agree with this sentiment or not?
Yes, I agree with that. You can't decide because you don't know what other people need specifically. You know what you need yourself, and then you want to base your points on what you yourself have experienced or what you need. And that doesn't usually always apply to everyone. Actually, it mostly doesn't apply to everyone.
Yeah, no, it is very difficult to be able. You can't. Yeah, no. It's very difficult for a single person to be able to not only have the incentive of the greater population's interest, to just have that interest already is something that isn't often found, and then to find a person that not only has that but is able to understand almost everyone's points of view and understand where everyone is coming from and how everyone struggles and how everyone needs something different, that is a very special person, and there's very few of them. And so no, I'm not saying I have all the perfect answers. I barely have any. Yeah. So no, yeah, like I don't think there are any things that we can say for certain need to happen because we don't understand all of the ramifications of that decision.
From what I can say is that I know they always say education is sort of like a weapon almost, because someone who is educated can probably overpower people who aren't educated. And I believe that this thing that everyone should have is an education, because that will help them protect themselves firstly, so they don't get like used because they don't know what money works, or they aren't. I don't know how people explain it properly, but I believe that people should have the ability to learn properly and to do research. From the experiences I've had, I believe someone should have the ability to go research something and be able to understand it and learn from it, and then be able to apply that. I believe that is something people should have, and that would benefit a lot of people. But that's just my own belief.
So in that case, don't you think then it's our duty that the time that we do have for learning and research, that we use it for that, and we try to make maximum impact through that kind of activity? Each of us, every single person. So we maximally use the opportunities that were given to us. Yeah.
I mean, what that's saying, what's it? Give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. I think that's a very good metaphor.
Yes, so I think that it seems like our conclusion is that the best we can do is to make best out of the opportunities we have.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also that as we go on, though at self-admittedly don't have the answers, I would like to do my best as I progress to try and help the system and make it better in future however I can. And this is recorded. I would hope that if once I have my degree, once I am in a position and a profession, I'd hope that people hold me accountable to that. That they say, you said you would do this and you aren't. I think the best we can do is have conversations without feeling personal about it, so that we can understand each other. Not try and act like we have solutions, but if we understand each other, then we can all work towards something common, really.
Yes, you said it very well, and the usefulness of such conversations is to also to get feedback, and maybe to determine. I mean, maybe we are on the wrong track here. Maybe the problems we're discussing are actually not relevant, right? Then somebody who will watch this video will tell us, look, you're on the wrong track. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe someone who will watch this video will get inspired and actually come up with some solutions that we couldn't come up with, right? So exchanging our thoughts, I think, is important. And really, I think that this was the purpose of the video. And thank you very much to Chad for your story and for allowing us to engage with you on this topic.
Sorry.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Sorry, sir. I just wanted to say, I know you said something about being able to, we should use our resources to the fullest of our ability. And I just wanted to elaborate on that and saying that people have the resources, and people always tell us that you have the resources. But I think the biggest thing is we need to be taught how to use these resources. Because not everyone knows how to use a computer, not everyone knows how to Google, or they don't know which sites are actually reliable. Because there's a lot of false things on these things as well.
Yes, and each of us have to make this decision, how much we use the resources and how much we teach others to use the resources. Like, for example, myself as a professor, I make this decision, how much time to spend with students to try to show them some ways of how to make use of resources of mathematical knowledge, and how much time to spend on my research and developing mathematics further. And so it again goes back to deciding for ourselves what's the best next step for each of us. With the hope that if each of us tries to do our best step, then overall we will move forward.
Yes, exactly. It all starts with you first. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Okay, so in light of that, I think the best next step for us specifically is to end this discussion, which has been going now for more than 1 hour and well, at least 1.5 hours, and maybe to give ourselves some time to reflect on it. And if we have some ideas that we want to come back to in the future, we can have another discussion, of course. Thank you very much.
Encourage more things like this.
Yeah, well, sure. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we invite anyone who is listening to this, we invite them to engage in future discussions and to propose future discussions. And also thank you very much, Mr. van der Westhuizen, for joining us. It was nice to have you. And also to Mr. Dixon, who had to leave earlier.
Thank you so much. It was an amazing experience.
Thank you. Bye.